I'm Cyrus Taylor. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Case Western Reserve University, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this 2013 Social Justice Institute Conference on Educating for Struggle. I can't tell you how proud and excited I am to be here this evening. This conference really is a next stage in the evolution of what's been a major thrust of the university for the last couple of years, headed up by the Social Justice Institute. The Social Justice Institute is a major initiative of Case Western Reserve that came out of our 2008 strategic plan, Forward Thinking. Now, it's not an accident that social justice was one of the four legs that we built this strategic plan on. Issues of social justice are deeply embedded in the DNA of the institution. You know, while like many, if not most institutions, the commitment to social justice has had its ups and downs over what's now almost 2 centuries, the commitment really goes back to the very beginning. Owen Brown, John Brown's father, was one of the first members of the Board of Trustees of Western Reserve, and I think set a tone that at least from time to time we followed since then. This commitment to the role of universities in social change continued, for example, after the Federation of Western Reserve University with Case Institute of Technology, with the first president of the combined institution, Robert Morse, who was a passionate believer in the role that universities could play in changing society for the better. And in your program, you have a note from our current president, Barbara Snyder, that reaffirms this commitment to the tradition and the importance of social justice and the role of the university in effecting change. Now, coming out of the 2008 strategic plan, the next step was actually the creation of the Social Justice Institute, and this was formally launched in 2010 with funding from a number of the schools together with the provost office. And the mission of the Social Justice Institute is working towards equal access to opportunity for all people through understanding and addressing the root causes of social injustice and developing innovative solutions. That is, that we're not just here to study it, we're here to figure out how to change it. So in that context, the workshop that we're launching this evening, I think, is particularly important. Educating for struggle in the academy, schools, prisons, and streets, I think gets down to what it's all about. So I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to this conference. I hope it is an extraordinarily productive one. I hope if this is your first time at the university, it won't be your last. We are working to build a network and community that can effectively promote positive social change. And I hope this evening and this weekend really kicks this off in a profound way. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Rhonda Williams. Rhonda is Associate Professor of History. She's the Director of the Social Justice Institute. She is a force of nature when it comes to working to effect social change. And it's also my privilege to call her a good friend. And so, with that, I turn it over to Rhonda.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We are so excited about the two-day conference. We're calling the think tank, Intergenerational Think Tank, Educating for Struggle here at Case Western Reserve University. Thank you, Cyrus, so much for your welcoming remarks, and thanks for actually being here and being a die-hard, consistent, authentic supporter from the very beginning of the Social Justice Institute and its work. So, I am so excited. We have Maytha here, and we have Sister Sonia here, and we have Jasiri X here, and we have Dante and Lisa and HQ and Pauline here. it's just, those are all some of the panelists. They're all in the audience with us here tonight. And it's just so exciting to have them here, you here, us together tomorrow, tonight, to really engage in a dialogue. What Dr. Rhonda needs to do is go back to her script, because I can often ad-lib, and you're really not here to hear me all night. You're here to hear Maytha and Sister Sonia and a dialogue that we'll have, and then a conversation. But I do want to do a few things. Many of you may not have been to a Social Justice Institute event before, so I want to tell you a little bit about the Social Justice Institute. I gotta thank our sponsors, and then I'm going to give you the introductions for Maytha and Sister Sonia and turn it all over to them. The Social Justice Institute is dedicated to creating a space for broad-based conversations that can educate, inspire, and bridge ideas and people who are on the pathway to trying to figure out how to generate solutions and actions to social injustice. For instance, we teamed up with Facing History and Ourselves, Olivet Institutional Baptist Church, and the Office of Inclusion, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity at CWRU to bring Diane Nash and Reverend C.T. Vivian, freedom riders who braved the vitriol of segregation to test the law against discrimination on interstate travel in 1961. We co-sponsored a citywide reading group on Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, which culminated in her giving a public lecture. Both of these actually are on our website, and you can go check them out and look at them. We joined with the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County and others in an effort led by Letitia James of the Center for Community Partnerships here at CWRU to actually sponsor 3 public hearings on mental health, race, and economic inequality. We work with KeyBank and WCPN, our NPR station, and numerous other organizations to plan a screening of Slavery by Another Name, written by Pulitzer Prize winner Doug Blackman. We held Power Up, a student youth leadership training event. We premiered the documentary The End of Poverty with the Inamori Center for International Ethics and Excellence at CWRU as part of our UN World Social Justice Day programming. And in April 2014, 4th and 5th, I believe, we will, for our 4th year, work with Rid All Green Partnership and Environmental Health Watch to focus attention on the urban agriculture movement, food justice, and power. And this is just a sampling of the convenings that we've been engaged in. We also are laboring a way to build a social justice undergraduate curricular program on campus and to engage in important community bridge building efforts and research through, for instance, our Voicing in Action project launched in East Cleveland. At SJI, we really believe in the power of people's experiences and voices. We see both as important sources of wisdom for understanding yesterday and today, and as important sources of direction for beginning to build more just tomorrows. There is much more that SJI hopes to do, and this is all in the first 3 years that we've done thus so far. So we're a toddler in the scheme of things, and we have a lot more that we like to do and move forward. It was in fall 2010 that SJI launched its public face with a free and open to the public 2-day conference similar to this one. It was entitled Social Justice, Race, and Profiling. And actually we have at least one of our panelists who was at that think tank and was a participant here in the audience today. Ed is here. It was an intergenerational think tank. We had young people from ages 10, 12, 15, all the way up to 70 plus in conversation and in dialogue. Bakari was here. He had an intergenerational dialogue with Bernice Johnson Reagan. It was just fabulous. Now, 3 years later, we're here again, this time focusing on educating for struggle in the academy, schools, prisons, and streets from a multi-generational perspective. This gathering of national and local scholars and activists, policy experts, and students and youth has been made possible with the help of people and organizations who believe in the vision and building the work of the Social Justice Institute. So this is the moment where I thank my team and my sponsors, the SJI leadership team. I thank the conference planning team. Our co-sponsors include the ACLU of Ohio, District 7, Cuyahoga County Councilwoman Yvonne Conwell, Kent State University Pan-African Studies Department, Merle Johnson, Vincent Holland, Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence, the City of Cleveland Office of Sustainability, and at Case Western Reserve University, we have the Baker Nord Center for the Humanities, the Center for Community Partnerships, the Office of Inclusion, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity, the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and the President's Advisory Council on Minorities. I want to give special thanks to Bon Appetit, Media Vision, Martinez. Is Martinez here tonight? He was going to try to make it. Martinez is a local artist who did the original art on your program, the front of your program. He did the original art. So we're also trying to provide pathways to use the talents and skills and help provide a basis for them finding outlets and resources for the work that they do here at the Institute. We want to thank Terry Geiger, Bakari Kitwana, Rap Sessions LLC, Coyote, who's our SJI webmaster, Tamara Schick, and Alexandria Carter, who is a volunteer. Can we give them all a round of applause? I also want to give a special thanks to Shelley White, I see standing in the back, and is Allison, where's Allison? Allison, tell Allison to step in. Oh, she might be working. So Shelley White and Allison. Shelley White is a SJI administrator, and Allison is our former student worker. She graduated, and she wanted to stay on with us and continue to work with the Institute. And I'm just telling you, without these two women, this program would not have happened. Logistically, they have been doing the work. Most of you who are here as speakers have spoken to them ad nauseum many times to make sure that we have things right. And so I just have to say and have to acknowledge Shelley White and Allison George. Can you give them a big round of applause, please? So now to our opening event featuring Maytha, Alhassen, and Sister Sonia Sanchez. You should know that all the sessions, including our opening and closing keynotes, are being recorded, and they will be made available via our website. Tonight, Sister Sonia and Maytha will each speak. Maytha will go first, followed by Sister Sonia, and then we'll have a moderated dialogue, followed by, we hope, a really robust exchange with you all in the audience. After the plenary, we'll actually have a book signing outside, and we'll have a light reception, so please stay with us for that. So let me introduce you to our esteemed presenters and then turn it over to them. Maytha Alhassen was born to Syrian parents in a suburb of Southern California. She is a doctoral student in American Studies and Ethnicity at the University of Southern California. She is also an author, a poet, and a blogger. She has served as a guest host for Al Jazeera's The Stream. Her writings have appeared in the Huffington Post, Counterpunch, and The Nation. She is the co-editor of Demanding Dignity, Young Voices from the Front Lines of the Arab Revolutions, which is the third book in the I Speak for Myself series. Her work operates at the intersections of social justice, academic research, media, and art. In the introduction to Demanding Dignity, she talks about how, while attending a conference in Spain, she decided to visit other areas in the region. And this opened her eyes to the, quote, social political history of Tunisia, the revolution, and the work of youth organizers. Whether internationally or stateside, she works to actually bridge scholarly engagement to real-world exploration that undergird her work and explains, as she says, why she cares. Sister Sonia Sanchez, my goodness, I mean, we could be here all weekend. She is an elder torchbearer of words, a poet, a lyricist, an author, a scholar, a truth teller. She is an activist, a trailblazer of liberation struggles, civil rights, women's rights, black power, anti-war, seeker of economic justice. She is one who has criticized the privileging of profit over people, a move that puts all of our humanity at risk. She was among the avant-garde of the Black arts movement in the 1960s. She is the author of 16 books. She has served as a contributing editor to the Black Scholar Journal. She has won innumerable fellowships and awards, including the Peace and Freedom Award from the Women International League for Peace and Freedom and the Ford Freedom Scholar Award and the Pew Fellowship. She has lectured at over 500 colleges and universities in Africa and Australia and Cuba and England and the People's Republic of China, in Canada, and yes, here in the United States. She is the soon-to-be retired poet in residence at Temple University in Philadelphia. She has almost 8 decades on the planet. Applause, please. In her book, Homegirls and Hand Grenades, 1984, which won the American Book Award, Sister Sonia has a section entitled Grenades Are Not Free, a Luta Continua. And in that section, she has a poem entitled Reflections After the June 12th March of Disarmament. And in that poem, she writes, quote, I come to you tonight because there are inhumanitarians in the world. They are not new, they are old, they go back into history. Stanzas later, she continues, I come to you because the world needs to be saved for the future generations who must return the earth to peace. I am here because I shall not give the earth up to non-dreamers and earth molesters. So in the name of dreamers for social justice, for humanity, for peace in struggle, let's welcome Maytha Alhassen and Sister Sonia Sanchez.
Good evening, everybody. I want to express first my gratitude, my extreme gratitude for everybody involved in organizing this event, to Rhonda, to Shelley, and to Bakari, who really arranged this for me. And I'm in immense awe that I get to share the stage tonight with Sister Sonia Sanchez. I can't even, I might have moments of speechlessness, so you'll have to forgive me. So, in the interest of living what I say I am, being somebody in the intersection of the arts and social justice and academia, I wanted to start out with a poem. This poem is called An Open Letter to Trayvon and Hamza. We know that you are one of many like you. A generation of boys stolen from their mothers, sent to battlefields, riddled with bullets from behind, measured for coffins, banished to jail cells, least you remind us of our own inhumanity. You became our symbols, labeled thugs and terrorists, simply for existing. There's no litany left in me to compel people to see your beauty. Why did your bodies matter more to us as corpses than when they were full of life? Why did we need to videotape your parents' grief while robbing you of a dignified death? Please, bring me men who do not want to make a mockery of our wombs. Thank you. This is the poem, a shortened version. A group I belong to called Dot to Dot put up our responses to what happened to Trayvon as a tribute to his memory. And first thought that I had in my mind was the travesty of the premature deaths of our babies. And Hamza, who is Hamza? Hamza is Hamza Ali al-Khatib. He was a 13-year-old boy who disappeared on April 29, 2011, when he was protesting with his family in the countryside of Syria called Daraa. And he was protesting to end the siege that the regime had inflicted on Daraa. He disappeared, and then on May 25th, 2011, his parents received a coffin, and it was sealed. And it was sealed, and the regime gave the coffin under the condition that the parents would not open it. Family members insisted that they open the coffin. They opened it up. They saw their child with broken bones, mutilated genitals, burn marks, gun wounds. 13-year-old boy. He was our Emmett Till. And this time, YouTube was our Jet magazine. He was our Emmett Till from when we saw what the regime did on YouTube. You could not help but confirm the brutality. There was no going back from here. We couldn't be silent anymore. We couldn't stand witness to such evil and continue to call ourselves humans. I want to quickly, going back to Trayvon, I want to kind of stress the solidarity of these two young men. This is a city in Syria called Kafranbel. It's called occupied Kafranbel because it's the little city that could. It's one of the few liberated areas in Syria that continues to practice peaceful, nonviolent, non-sectarian resistance. And so when they heard about what happened to Trayvon, they created this sign. Martin family, the Syrians are the best who know what it's like to lose loved ones by immune criminals. And they wrote this on July 15th, 2013. Now, I want to go back to this idea of our babies dying prematurely. And when I think about this, I think about Ruthie Gilmore's definition of racism. How many in the room are familiar with her definition? Let me offer it back to you. She says, racism is the state-sanctioned or extra-legal production and exploitation of group-differentiated vulnerability to premature death. Basically, what this is saying is, why are our babies dying prematurely? That's how I think about it. So I've been moved to really think about what my place is in this struggle, especially since my family is from Syria and I live here, and I was compelled to move for Hamza, I was compelled to move for Trayvon, but what was I supposed to do? As Rhonda had mentioned to you, I was born in Southern California, so I agonized to think about what is my role when I wake up every morning to palm trees and electricity, and I have family members that wake up to Scud missiles, and the threat of death, and the omnipresent stench of death. So I did what I could. I reached out to people and I asked them, what can I do for you? Tell me, do you need money? Do you need us to help you escape? Do you need a job? What do you need? And all these little things seemed like they could amount to something, but it still didn't feel like enough. I was trying to go in multiple times. It was fortunately met by some sort of moment of fate that intervened and didn't allow me to go. I've had many people who have died from this uprising, but my clear moment of when I could put myself to use for the people in the Arab world was when this book opportunity came about. Rhonda had mentioned that I was traveling around Tunisia, Lebanon, and Egypt and seeing what was going on, how youth were organizing, how they were learning from Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and they were inspired by creating sit-in movements in their city center. They were inspired by the words of Malcolm X, and I knew these stories couldn't just exist over there, so somebody had approached me and asked me if I would put together a book of youth stories. So this is the book that came about. It's called Demanding Dignity, Young Voices from the Front Lines of the Arab Revolutions. It was a very interesting process because it started at the end of the summer of 2011, and we thought it was only going to take 2.5 months to put this book together. The thought was we were going to get about 20 youth activists and ask them to write 3,000 to 5,000 word essays about what it was like to be at the front lines of their revolution, something between an eyewitness report and a journal entry. Now, we didn't anticipate that it would actually be quite difficult to get essays from people who are activists and on the ground and have something better to do than to write a 3,000 word essay and actually have marches that they are organizing and campaigns that they are organizing. And the other interesting thing was that these youth, English wasn't their first language, but we wanted to present their stories to an American audience and a European audience. So it took an extensive amount of time trying to work with them from Skype, from meeting them sometimes, from telephone conversations. But I think the most profound thing that I didn't think I was going to realize in this process was the role that dignity played. And it was miraculous. One essay after another used the word dignity in Arabic, karama. And they also didn't call their uprisings uprisings. They didn't call their civil war civil wars. They called them revolutions. And they still to this day continue to call them revolutions. Thawra, as I have it up there. So when I read dignity everywhere, dignity squares in Yemen, one of the writers who was leading a protest in Syria said, "The moment I screamed freedom was the moment I first felt my dignity." And he was doing that in a street, a very open-air street in Syria, in Damascus. And I'm somebody who has been to Damascus a couple of times, and I think the media cannot do a proper job of understanding what it was like before the uprising or what it's like now. Before, it was the model of a police-repressed state. Cell phones didn't come into the country till 2000. Internet didn't come until 2005. If you wanted to meet with a group of people to talk about anything, politics or theater, if it was more than 3 people, you had to get that registered through the government. That's the Syria they lived in. So the fact that they could congregate and protest and they knew this was a government that was going to respond brutally, I'm in shock, and I continue to be in shock with their resolve and the resilience. But back to the point of dignity, it made me think about when we talk about liberation struggles, what are we really fighting for? What does it mean to fight for freedom? What does it mean to fight for dignity? Are struggles really about asking the state to liberate us? Or are we asking to live a dignified life in these borders, in these political sort of boundaries that we live in? So the other thing it made me think about was how do we define dignity? And I realized you know dignity when it is the most absent. And the first time that it hit me like a searing knife in my heart was I used to work at Rikers Island with incarcerated youth with a program called Blackout Arts Collective. It was a group of artists in New York who came together to try to use art as a tool for social change. And one of our campaigns was called Lyrics on Lockdown. And we used arts as a tool for facilitation for workshops around the prison industrial complex at Rikers Island with the youth. And the youth, age 16 through 19, it was quite fascinating because one of the first things you notice when you go to Island Academy, which is their high school, is you walk down a hallway. How many people have been to Rikers Island or Island Academy? When you go down the hallway, you see a mural to your side. The mural is of a young boy who's kneeling down sideways, and his image is cut in half. One half has prison bars around it, in front of it. The other one has barbed wire. And he's in a jumpsuit on the bars one, and he's in a soldier's outfit with a gun on the other half with the barbed wire. And at the bottom it says, "Choose your green." Choose your green. That's it. That's the image these students walked past every single day. That was their faith. That was their fate. Either you are behind bars or you're going to be a killing machine for a government that doesn't care about you. And so that's when I realized that, I mean, we're sending 16-year-olds without their parents and telling them this is their future. And so I realized that our struggles were so very connected. I just wanted to also kind of transition, though, thinking about dignity, about maybe a certain methodology of how we get to dignity. And as Rhonda mentioned, I'm in the academy, but I think the thing that has wore the hardest on me is the academy's privileging of the cerebral, sometimes at the expense of the heart and the spirit. So, and we talked a little bit, we had a phone conversation beforehand about, for me, how important spirit practice is in everything we do and everything I do. And so when I'm forced to create analysis around things being critical, around breaking things down, around deconstructing, around things that are decolonial, I wonder, how do we build things back up? So I was inspired to think about a Sufi thinker. His name is Ibn Arabi. He talks about seeing with both eyes. And what he means by that is that you have the eye of imagination and the eye of reason. And the interesting thing with human beings is that when we operate with reason, we are able to make a discernment and to be critical and to understand that we are not God. Now, when we operate with imagination, we see ourselves as one, and we see ourselves within God. So to see ourselves with two eyes means that we marry that vision of being within God and recognizing God's omnipresent force. So how do I bring this back to the academy? I think about how we talk about being critical, but what if we talked about being critically compassionate and compassionately critical? So that, for me, is seeing with two eyes. Let me get to this part. So, too many times in the struggle, as I mentioned, I've seen a tearing down without a building back up. We talk about decolonializing minds, deconstructing arguments, destroying prisons, defeating heavy-handed state surveillance and violence. What happened when the civil rights movement just focused on desegregating? What was the buildup? What happened when third world movements just focused in on decolonizing? What was the buildup? And too many times we were anti-racist, anti-imperial, anti-colonial, anti-discrimination. Heck, the leading Arab American civil rights organization is called the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. Anti-sexism, anti-homophobia, anti-capitalism. But what were we saying we were for? Our challenge in this forefront struggle of the academy, jails, streets, and schools is asking ourselves not just what we are against, but what we are for. If we are only clear about what we are against, we are once again allowing systems of domination to dictate the framing of the discourse. In the quest to rid, eradicate, uproot oppressive, corrupt, dehumanizing systems that do not and will not serve us, let us not forget to offer the build something up. This weekend, I'll be actively listening to speakers, participants, and community members to offer possibilities for building up and witnessing humanizing visions of dignity. I also want us to think about what it really means to see with both eyes. What does it mean to sit and witness what we hear this weekend and think about being critically compassionate and compassionately critical? What does it mean in this quest to trying to save our babies from premature death? What does it mean when we're talking about honoring life? What does it mean when we talk about dignifying a human life instead of their death? So I just wanted to leave you with, ooh, that was not anticipated. Wanted to leave you with that thought. What does it mean to see with two eyes? And I know we're going to continue to talk about struggle. And I, being somebody who practices Islam, wanted to leave you with something that I think about when I sometimes get down on the idea of struggle and hardship. There's a surah called Ash-Shar, and this is a verse from it. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا. For indeed with hardship comes ease. Indeed with hardship comes ease. So I promise when we struggle together, we will find that ease. Let us look with both eyes and struggle together. Thank you.
Do you want your computer? I need to put my things down. It's okay. I can manage. How are you? It's good being here. You saw that I was limping. A funny thing happened to me. I was finishing up 2 books, and, and I was staying up late. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Let me. Thank you. Sometimes you see the difference between the generations, right? I come with my typed notes, and other people come up with their computers, and my sons are always telling me, you really need to take the computer up there on the stage with you. And I said, yeah, I know. And I was, you know, getting 3 hours sleep at night for 2 weeks, and I really thought that I could do that. And my son came to visit me, one of my sons, and I went on the porch and, you know, didn't realize that I was probably sleepwalking for those 2 weeks, and turned around to go into my house, and my foot, that's really how I was not awake, got caught in the big, thick mat outside my door, and I went forward and hit both knees on the concrete step. So every morning, instead of writing my morning haiku, every morning, and when I wake up, my knees say, good morning, Sonia. Today, we're going to have a little pain. And I truly do understand pain, and I truly do understand knees for the first time. I'm paying a lot of attention to them. To my dear Sister Rhonda and Sister Maytha, Brother Katari, and all of the people who brought me here, it is really good being in Cleveland again. Oh, thank you, light, and there was light. Because I haven't been this way in a long time. Someone just reminded me. I was at Hampton College last weekend for a conference, and I said, oh, gee, it's been about 10 years since I've been here. And the sister said, oh, it's been 28 years. And that is to say to you that quite often when you do go to these places, because what you say, they don't bring you back. And I truly understand that, you know? They really don't bring you back. And so therefore, at some point, they make sure that the next generation does not hear what you have to say. And in academia, that is what discontinuity is really all about. The joy that I had is I taught for 40 years in academia. And as a consequence, I was able then to touch a lot of young people along the way and to see something called change happening. And to see also, to influence a bunch of young people to do some things that were so important to do. And one of the things, I don't have my watch with me, so she said 15 minutes, so I'd like a watch, okay? Thanks. Thank you. One of the things that, that I was always so happy about in academia, and I was talking to Rhonda about it, is that I never flunked any of my students. And someone said, that's because you're so easy, probably. I said, no, I'm a hard cookie in a classroom. You come in my classroom, I work your behinds off. You don't get out of my class unless you know really what I'm talking about. But what I did do, however, is when I realized, in quotes, that you were not really ready to hear what I had to say, I would very calmly ask you to come to my office. And I would say, I'm going to give you a withdrawal with passing. You come back in a couple years when you're ready to hear this, when you're ready to really study, I said. But I'm giving you an out You need to get out of here, you know, at some point. And also, I don't need for you to tell somebody, because I have a lot of colleagues around the country. I don't need you to walk up to someone and say, oh, you know, I studied with Professor Sonia Sanchez, and then you come out with, you know, something that's really idiotic. I don't need that at all, or misinformation or no information at all. And it was really something to see years later, someone walk into my class 2 years later and would sit down and begin the whole process of learning. And that's what this has really all been about as far as I'm concerned. And one of the things also in academia that I pushed with my students was that when you get out of here, sometimes some of them 3 years later or 4 years later, don't go right to grad school. Don't go into law and business, you know, all those other things you do, med school, whatever. Take a year off and go and teach in the elementary schools, you know, the middle schools, the high schools. Go and teach for 1 year to really see what America is about. You'll find it out when you go into that educational system. You'll learn how to struggle. When you struggle with people who are indeed, you know, running these systems and don't know what education is all about, don't have a clue, but they're there. And that struggle will make you truly understand what it means then to go to law school, what it really means. And that first year, that when they try to turn you around in law school, they can't do it because you have the backbone, the background of having been with young people who are struggling just to stay alive. I mean, they really are. They're struggling just to stay alive. You know, and I say that, and I still say it time and time again, but students say to me, but yeah, I gotta go because I wanna get out. You know, I said, and this whole thing that we do about making money, I said, you know, yeah, we need to make money because we have families, whatever, but we also need to know at some point and do at some point, like some people have done when they've come back to neighborhoods like the Lynns in Ohio. Staunton Lynn and his wife, you know, who moved into a working class neighborhood, right? You know, in order to make sure that they could impart knowledge and also live with people. When I came to a place called Philadelphia, because they put my behind out of a place called New York City, liberal New York City, because I was in academia, and I challenged academia, you know. So therefore, I was not then rehired. Isn't that something? You have no idea what that is. When, you know, you say you're a New Yorker, you say that, you know, you're going to be here forever, and also, in quotes, that arrogance of being a New Yorker. Yeah, you know, no, it really is an arrogance, like, yeah. And then they said at some point, no, you know, you are not going to get rehired at all. And so I had to look. There was a gig here in Ohio, and I said, it's too cold in Ohio. There's a gig offered to me in Michigan. I said, oh my God, it's really cold in Michigan, in Detroit. And then someone wrote me a letter, a place called Amherst College. And I figured I could drive from New York to Amherst College in 2 hours and be with my family back and forth. And so I went to a place called Amherst College, you know, to teach and to survive. And what I learned, and I want some of you young people to learn, you can live any place on this earth as long as you go and organize where it is that you go to, and don't say only New York, only Cleveland, you know, only Atlanta, only DC, you know, because it taught me a great lesson that I could live and organize any place, right? Organize the students and teach whatever. And it was a very humbling experience for me for that to happen. And I am so grateful that that educational system decided to put my behind out of New York and send me on an amazing movement to different universities. And every place I went, you know, I left some people, I left some students, you know, who were able to work and carry on. And that is really a great, great joy. I call on living and ago resistors, Sandy Smith, Rosa Parks, Joanne Gibson, Octavia Butler, Daisy Bates, John Lewis, Dorothy Cotton, Charlene Hunter Galt, John Conyers, Gloria Richardson, June Jordan, John Hope Franklin, Thurgood Marshall, Cynthia McKinney, Mary McLeod Bethune, A. Philip Randolph, Herbert and Faye Aptheker, Adam Clayton Powell, Geronimo Pratt, Thelonious Monk, Fred Shuttlesworth, Marion Wright Elderman, Tony K. Bambara, Toni Morrison, Kay Ball, Barbara Lee, Chokwe Lumumba, Barbara Deming, Ann Braden, Charles Houston, William Hastings, Shirley Chisholm, Angela Davis, Mary Church Terrell, Sojourner Truth, Catherine Dunham, Bill and Camille Cosby, Elizabeth Catlett, Reverend Calvin Butts, Maurice Bishop, Nat Turner, Medgar Evers, Maya Angelou, Oprah Winfrey, Cornel West, Tavis Smiley, John Coltrane, Shirley Graham Du Bois, W.B. Du Bois, Langston Hughes, Chinua Achebe, Esther and Jim Jackson, Benjamin Davis, William Patterson, Toussaint Dessalines, Sandino, Harriet Tubman, Rosemary Harding, Vincent Harding, Monroe Trotter, Edward Said, Charlie Parker, Dick Gregory, Dizzy Gillespie, Marcus Garvey, Paul Robeson, Albert Einstein, Lumumba, Kwame Ture, Chuck D., Frederick Douglass, Coretta Scott King, Johnetta Cole, Cabral, Richard Pryor, Sun Ra, Chairman Ma, Nina Simone, Joy Harjo, Ngugi Thiong'o, Adrian Rich, Margaret Randall, Stephen Biko, Herman Ferguson, Betty Shabazz, Asata, Katie Cannon, Paula Marshall, Sadie Alexander, Julia Wright, Richard Wright, Bishop Camera, Leonard Peltier, Baird Rustin, Howard Thurman, Walt Whitman, Thich Nhat Hanh, Jose Marti, Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, Senator Edward Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Max Roach, Ella Fitzgerald, Randy Weston, Dr. T.R.M. Howard, Erykah Badu, Lauryn Hill, Ursula Rucker, Cecil Gray, Toshi Reagan, Julian Bond, Staunton and Alice Linton, Lynn, Charlie Cobb, Harry Belafonte, Danny Glover, Milton Rogovan, Katherine Dunham, Duke Ellington, Abraham Heschel, Ruby Doris, Mickey James and Andy, Emmett Till, Bob Marley, Bessie Head, Franz Fanon, Walter Mosley, Michael Weaver, Linton Cressy Johnson, St. Clair Brown, Ethel Hedgeman Lyle, Archbishop Tutu, John Henry Clark, Bob Moses, John Killens, Queen Mother Moore, Septima Clark, S.K. Imfahilele, Bobby Sands, Patrick Hill, James Bowen, Grace Paling, Allen Ginsberg, Paul Blackburn, Anne Waldman, Barbara Ann Tier, George Lamming, Sekou Sondiata, Ruby Dee, Ozzie Davis, Art Tatum, Pam Africa, Ramona Africa, Muhammad Ali, Gene Hudson, Mr. Michaud, C.L.R. James, Gandhi, Grace and James Boggs, Sandra Cisneros, Nicholas Guillen, Beverly and Walter Lomax, Mumia, Mari Evans, Marcus Garvey, Amy Jack Garvey, Pablo Neruda, Gwendolyn Brooks, Amina and Amiri Baraka, Askia Touré, The Last Poets, Lucille Clifton, Bessie Smith, Hakeem Adabuti, Dorothy Day, Fidel, Tupac, Rakim, Asada, Talib, The Roots, Pernell Joseph, Brenda Green, Yuri Kochiyama, Billie Holiday, Margaret Burroughs, Mos Def, Dead Prez, Common, Ida Wells Barnett, Betty Carter, Mfunde Ella Baker, Kristen McBride, Father Paul Washington, Dave Richardson, Merle Evans Williams, Dr. Dorothy Height, Henry Hampton, Bob Marley, Howard Zinn, Kenneth Clark, Sonny Rollins, Asa Hilliard, Zaid Shakur, Lorraine Hansberry, Zora Neale Hurston, Louise Merriweather. And there are about 3 more pages. And Malcolm, 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 Malcolm. And there are other people that someone would come up to me and say, you didn't say it. I said it's on the page, but it does. Yet I'm limited. If I had my regular time, I would do them all, because what happens when I do it with university students, someone came up to me afterwards and said, who was Emmett Till? Emmett Till's in this. And someone got upset because this young person asked, who's Emmett Till? I said, don't get upset. I mean, what are they taught? And we probably should get upset with the parents too, right? Because the parents need to teach also what some of this is all about. Let me just read a couple of things, and we will probably elaborate some more, as while we're here having the conversation. The light is pretty bad up here. I'm so sorry. It's hitting my eyes, so therefore I'm not really seeing what I've written. So maybe that computer is a good thing, because it does deal with darkness, if you understand what I'm saying. I had a quote that Du Bois talked about things that we do, computers. He talked about this before, in quotes, people got computers, that how it keeps us from really, at some point, doing some of the things we should be about. It is helpful on some things. No, I'm very serious about that. I'll get the quote by the time we're sitting down there. When I started to write, I wanted to tell how I had became this woman with razor blades between her teeth. What made me want to pilot others into my bloodstream. What made me rise up to tell my story, and finally to learn other people's stories and to tell them all. It must have been something under our skirts, women from Africa, the Caribbean, Asia, Latin America. Some things unaccented, accented, in our talk and in our walk. Jose Marti wrote, in the world, there must be a certain degree of honor, just as there must be a certain degree of light. When there are many men and women without honor, there are always others. Don't turn the light down. Others who bear in themselves the honor of many men and women. How to tell you of peace and justice and change and hope, of America rising up out of an aristocracy of death, an aristocracy of corporate greed, an aristocracy of racism and sexism. An America that made, an America that made Langston Hughes write, we the people must redeem our land and make America, America again. An America that made me listen to the women and men and children crying out for mercy from corporate greed and sexism and racism and the gangsters on Wall Streets of the world. An America that offer you anything after you exited your course of correct study. Step right up, I say step right up, a young girl for sale today, for your hands, 14-year-old boy for your corporate breaths, for your Catholic cathedrals, anything for sale in America. How to tell you of a tall, white 17-year-old male who stood up in class with tears in his eyes and said, Professor Sanchez, I feel so safe in your class, but let me tell you what happened to me in my class here in Hartford, Connecticut. I asked my teacher, could we have a conversation about peace? And my teacher called me a terrorist. How can I tell you about lives running on hairpins of a country needing parts from people to live? Step right up. I say step right up. A good set on legs today, eyes today, hands today, kidneys today, livers today, hearts today, integrity today, truth today, families today. How to tell you of a country that will not recognize the two most important revolutions in the world, that of Haiti and Cuba, of Toussaint, Dessalines, and Fidel and Maytha, that were rooted in a cultural base. These two countries symbolize a regional process of struggle and liberation of the mind, which must be an essential part of the journey towards the fulfillment of this Western regional integrity. How to tell you of peace, so we move beyond a politician saying Cuba and everyone hears the voice of Washington shouting communist, but never the eloquent and graceful voice of Maytha, the spiritual father of the Cuban Revolution, who said, when he observed the conduct of the U.S. delegation in 1889 Monetary Congress of the American Republic, and I quote, "They believe in need, in the barbarous right as the only right. This will be ours because we need it." Almost 100 years later, after the invasion of Grenada by 6,000 U.S. soldiers, the U.S. Secretary of State, George Shultz, arrived, and his first observation was, "Complete," he said, "this is a delicious piece of real estate." How to tell you of walking, climbing the citadel in Haiti, and hearing the footsteps of a people and a country crying out for liberty, justice, equality, and change, not just boat people and AIDS, not just boat people and get back to your country. How to make you really understand that it's the activists, the writers, the students, the teachers, the prophets, the artists, the poets, the visionaries, who sing of peace and racial and social and sexual justice and economic justice. They come to us glittering like silver stones, and we catch them in mid-flight, swallow them whole, drink their vision, these gifts from the sea, their lives, actions, hearts, vibrating ideas, poems, sermons, and activism, songs and plays and film, their ideas changing the world, shifting the earth until it turns towards justice, freedom, and peace. How to make you remember Public Enemy, 1989, the number, Another Summer, Get Down, sound of the funky drummer, music hitting your heart, 'cause I know you got soul. Listen if you're missing, y'all, swinging while I'm singing, hey, giving what I'm getting, knowing what I'm knowing, while the black band's sweating and the rhythms bands rolling. Gotta give us what we want, gotta give us what we need, hey, our freedom of speech is freedom or death. We got to fight the power that be. Let me hear you say, fight the power, fight the power, fight the power, fight the power. 1980, How to make you hear your heart sounding, pounding out what W.B. Du Bois wrote. This is a beautiful world. This is a wonderful America, which the founding fathers dreamed until their sons drowned it in the blood of slavery, devoured it in greed. Our children must rebuild it. You, children of God and or spirituality, children of politics, children of culture, children of change and family must, like Neruda said, sing of the workers, of the children of the poor, sing of brotherhood and sisterhood, racial and sexual justice, sing of peace, peace, peace and change, for you all must sip at the edge of rivers. Your words must have the scent of the earth and the genius of the stars. You must store in your blood the memory of voices linking continents, making us abandon closed minds. You must spread yourself rainbow-like across seas, your voices stalking the morning stars, and you must help a generation of young people begin to question their silence, their poverty, their scarcity, their greed, their killings. You must help them ask the most important question we can ask ourselves: what does it mean to be human in the 21st century? How to make you continue to lift your eyes off the ground into a higher ground of living and being and loving. How to make you remember the men and women who battled against ignorance and slavery and capital punishment and fascism and homophobia and racial, social, and sexual oppression, obscene wages for the poor. Remember King's final crusade to end poverty? Remember? Working for guaranteed jobs with decent wages for the men, the sanitary workers, right? These men, who were called walking buzzards. Isn't that amazing? They called them walking buzzards. And people laughed at them as workers, and they were paid $170 an hour, and they put those trash cans on their heads, 55 gallons carried, period, on their heads. How to make you remember James Baldwin, that great writer, a man Baraka called God's Black Revolutionary Mouth, who said in 1979 in the New York Times article, "If Black English isn't a language, then tell me what it is." And I say that because every 10 years you get a call from either the Washington Post or the New York Times to say, "Is there such a thing as Black English?" And I refer them to Jimmy Baldwin's article. You should do the same, okay? Because it's a lot of nonsense when what they're talking about. If Black English isn't a language, then tell me what it is. His article supported the idea that Black English was just like American English, because it ain't, as he said, because it ain't British English, thank God. and it's not a dialect. Don't let me hear you teach people that it's a dialect. It is black. It's a language, black English. How to make you remember Baldwin saying, it goes without saying that then that language is also a political instrument, means and proof of power. It is the most vivid and crucial key to identity. It reveals the private identity and connects one with or divorces one from the larger public or communal identity. He continues, it is too late in the day to penalize blacks for having created a language that permits the country its only glimpse of reality, a language without which the nation would be even more whipped than it is. He continues, a language comes into existence by means of brutal necessity, and the rules of the language are dictated by what the language must convey. So we know that this disturbance about black English is rooted in this American history and history of blacks being posted together, chained to each other from different areas, different cultures, different countries, and they could not speak the same language. They came here, had to survive the gun, the whip, the religion, the Bible, bad food, hatred, and the rapes. They had to alert each other of the dangers of this Western wilderness, and they learned how to say it through a new language that was not taught him or her, but one that came from the marrow, the blood, the rhythm, the corpuscles of an ancient people, combined with the rawness of this new European Western arrogance and bestiality. The skill that was accomplished, and I quote, the sheer intelligence, as Miss Toni Morrison calls it, was not a dialect, but a language forged in neglect, brutality, death, longing, hope, and resistance. Baldwin continued, the brutal truth is that America never had any interest in educating black people, except as this could serve white purposes. It is not the black child's language that is in question. It is not his language that is despised. It is his experience. A child cannot be taught by anyone who despises him and her. And a child cannot afford to be fooled. A child cannot be taught by anyone whose demand essentially is that the child repudiate her experience and all that gave him, her substance and enter a limbo. She will no longer be black, and in which she knows she can never become white. I'll stop there. And what I'm talking about when I listen to the sister up here, and she brought a culture up here. You got to hear that. And when we move, also, we have to take our culture with us, because our culture supports us, okay? You know, culture is the consciousness of a people. That is why simply they give you ragged stuff on the idiot box, right? I mean, they give us stuff like, you know, programs like Revenge, you know? And what's the most popular one now that's out? Scandal. But the idea of revenge, you know, not forgiveness, okay, but revenge. And I actually am on a train listening to people say, did you see that last night? Did you see what she said she's going to do to him? Oh, yeah, she's going to really give him blah, 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 blah. America is a wise country. You're not dealing with just anybody here, people. You're dealing with people who understand truly how to form and formulate ideas and push it in young people's heads, you know? You got to understand that. And I was saying earlier today to my dear sister, I said, Sister Rhonda, I said, you know, I consciously moved to a place called Germantown in Philadelphia. When I moved there, I was at a university, and they showed me places in Chestnut Hill, down in Society Hill, and downtown. And I said very gently, you know, is there a place with people who look like me, who don't look like me, right? You know, people who go to school, people have children, old, elder people. And this person said to me, and I quote, it's still ingrained in my head, oh, there's a place called Germantown, but you don't want to move there because it's dangerous. I said, really? Yeah, you know, I who, you know, was raised in Harlem, right? I said, could you show me? We don't show that property. We'll have to go get another person to show you the property. And they showed me this house in a place called Germantown. And I lived there in Germantown. I was saying to Sister Rhonda that it's a place where you go, and behind me, there are people, professors and doctors and dentists and lawyers and Indian chiefs, people who live, right? And there are students on my block and elderly people walking down, you know, with those things that they push and whatever, et cetera, you know, and you stop. It's a street where people decided that since people weren't cutting the grass, that they would cement in the street, no, the sidewalks. And I said no, you know, although I belong to the organization. And I said, I'll tell you why, because I plant flowers out front. And the things sitting on my porch, seeing the children pass by, taking a flower, smelling the flower, and stopping along the way, and it makes for conversation. But I also told her that, you know, everyone knows that I'm, you know, well, I'm a macrobiotic. Some of you will ask me later on what is that, but it's like a vegan, like, you know. And so I go to the store for other stuff, not for my food, but I was saying I had an amazingly important class with my students the day before, and we would do out in the neighborhood, you know, being active, doing activism. And I went in the store to rush in to get stuff that I needed to wash some clothes. And I stopped and looked, as usual, at the produce. And the produce, the fruit and vegetables looked like they had a nervous breakdown. And that morning, although I had an appointment, someone was coming to my house, I took a cart and put all of the stuff in the cart and then went and pushed the produce button. And the guy came out and said, yeah. I said, is this selling for 50 cents or $1? All this brown fruit, rotten fruit, brown vegetables, and whatever. He said, no, lady, it's not. I said, it needs to be, you know, or you need to take it off. I said, I live in this neighborhood. This is my neighborhood. I live here in this neighborhood. How dare you bring this crap in here? I said, I guess I have to go downtown, right? Then up in Chestnut Hill to get decent stuff. He said, I'm going to call the police. I said, do that. We need the police in on this. This is a police action here. And he took the stuff and went on. I said, I'll be in here tomorrow, and I hope to see better stuff in here. But I got in line. I picked up my stuff, and there was a woman came up. She had 3 little children, about 5, 3, maybe, and 2, around that age. She said to me, and I quote, and every time I say it, you know, my heart, I want to cry. She said, how do you do that? And I, in being in a hurry, said, excuse me, ma'am. She said, first she said, how did you do that? And then she said, how do you do that? And I said, I don't understand. I was getting ready to say, I don't understand. Then I looked at her. I looked at her face, and I said, you mean, how do I? She said, how do you do that? I want to do that. You hear that? I want to do that. And I said, well, you know, I've been in a lot of organizations, you know, and we're taught to do things like that and to confront people. I did it in New York, you know, we went in and, you know, took over buildings and made, you know, wouldn't pay rent, you know, until people then got, you know, cleaned up the bathrooms and buildings, whatever. I said, something called activism. I said, here, let me give you my number. Why don't you call me? Because I do give out my number to my children's chagrin, you know. And I said, call me. But what I'm saying is that the question that people are really asking young people, how do you do that? How do you do that? Not like you did it and you're on television, right? Huh? You did it, you were on stage and you were good and you were hip, you know what I mean? But how do you do that? The question that America is asking, people are asking now, how do you do that? How do we do that in our neighborhoods? How do we do that in our houses, our homes? How do we do that in our hearts? How do we make these churches move in a way that they're not concerned about what hat you're wearing, what clothes you're wearing, huh? How do you do that? And tell the church, no, you can't tell me, you don't need to know how much I make a year, so therefore then you can then all of a sudden give me a seat up front, you know, whatever. How do you do that? How do we bring something called social justice? How do we bring this to our communities? How do we go back and come back from out in the boondocks, you know, as my friend says, it's so peaceful out here, Sonia. Why do you want me to come back in the city? It's unpeaceful. I said, because the world is unpeaceful. You know, and we got to make peace. We make peace by only putting ourselves in the midst of the struggle so peace can happen.
Can we give another round of applause for Maytha and Sister Sonia? So we're now entering into our moderated dialogue audience conversation. And I think I'm just going to start with one question. And then if you have a question, we have a microphone in the aisle on either side of the center aisle. So just please come up and we'll get right into questions and answers. But I do want to start us with one question. And I actually had four. I'm going to jump right to the fourth one. And my fourth question was, how can we build intergenerational wisdom? How can we build intergenerational wisdom and respect and understanding as we both advocate and engage in struggle? How do we do that?
Hear me?
Hello?
I can hear you.
It's hard for me sometimes to answer this question because I feel like I'm an anomaly for my generation. I want to sit and listen to elders. I want them to tell me their stories. And I wanted to hear the next 3 pages that you had. Right now, I'm a teacher's assistant at USC for a class called Black Social Movements in the US. And I wonder every single day how to hold their attention for more than the 30-second commercial that they're used to watching. And I struggle with trying to figure out how to trigger and stimulate curiosity. And I think that's how you engage them, is, as Sister Sonia was attempting to do, and very successfully, is figuring out how do we survive in these oppressive systems, right? These students don't understand that they're in oppressive systems at all. They think that, this is the number one thing that I hear that they think is an oppressive system, is the homophobic responses. And they feel like we live in a post-racial society. And they think the big struggle of their generation is against homophobia. And they don't understand that when they're stuck watching movies and updating it on social media, that this is movies, TV shows, that this is not their natural world, right? And I see the food that they bring in as well. You spoke a lot about food, and I'm a big advocate of not only wholesome food lifestyle. I eat raw food a lot too, and I've tried to start my own garden. I'm at USC. USC is in South LA. Thank you. USC is a very wealthy school that's surrounded by some of the most depreciated communities in all of Los Angeles. And to see that interaction between children of entrepreneurs and business owners and children of celebrities around a neighborhood that has nothing, and to have the students walking around in their latest MacBook, and I have a MacBook, I have an iPhone, we all have these things, and we walk around, and some of these students can't even, there's high schools and there's middle schools next to us, and some of these students that are at these public schools don't even know what they're gonna eat, you know? And to kind of have that juxtaposition of so much have and so much have not is really interesting, because it almost always transpires into a security report at night. This person was robbed. This person was approached. This person was sexually assaulted. And that's how they only know their community. And so my struggle is for me to try to make that youth generation realize that that they are the ones who are victims because they're not awake. And so
So you're talking about the youth on your campus right now. What
Yeah,
about, what about the youth in community? Do you travel into the space of community, and what are the youth in community saying and engaging in? How do we build wisdom from that kind of perspective?
Well, I started to talk about the revolutions that are happening in the uprisings in the Arab world, and that to me has been so profoundly eye-opening. I mean, talking about youth that have nothing, you were talking about countries with youth populations that are in the majority, and they graduate highly educated and they have no jobs and they have no food. Syria, as I mentioned, the country I'm from, the GDP is about 2,000 a year. And I have a cousin who was a banker, and he made less a year than a woman who does domestic work does in a week. And so when I listen to them, that's when I learn about what's going on. And there are things happening. There are the Dream Defenders. I don't know if you know about the Dream Defenders, who have stood up to what has happened with the Stand Your Ground laws. And they're organizing and they're using YouTube. And they were even silenced when they did this 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Those kids were supposed to have a platform for a couple of minutes to speak, I think 2 minutes or something like that, and they were pushed off the program. And so they created a YouTube campaign called 2 Minutes, something like that. And they had people create 2-minute videos about what they want from their government, what do they want from society. And so this kind of took off virally. I think it's picking up a little bit more steam. But you are seeing people who are organizing. My question is, though, as I'm teaching this course on Black social movements, is there a social movement happening?
Right. Sister Sonia, what are you thinking?
Well, you know, it's, I just turned 79, and many of us, I talk to my colleagues and my brothers and sisters. This sounds kind of funny.
It sounds like it just went up.
Yeah. It's can we, yeah. And no, we didn't think we were going to live this long. No, I'm serious.
For real, yeah.
No, you laugh.
Right.
When you get in a movement, you don't know how long you're going to live, okay? So that's what makes it difficult for people coming in to it. We didn't have a clue, but what we did know at some point is that we had to learn how to organize. Well, we were really aware of that, and we found it in many ways. Many of us, went into the CP party in New York, Many of us did all kinds of, went into the civil rights. I was in New York Core, right? And New York Core, I went into New York Core because it was what I call the most radical civil rights organization in America, right? That was New York, that was Core. And New York Core was known for the stuff that it did, right? And what I know at some point, even being in a civil rights organization, there was a classism that was involved with that. All the people in there were college graduates. They were educated people, in quotes, right? Very few people from the community. And by the time the late 1950s, when New York Core was going through a major change, that change was about, do you want whites in your organization? That went all over, from SNCC to New York Core to Core, whatever, et cetera. And then, do you want to be situated in a place out of the community? New York Core came home to Harlem, 125th Street people, and began to organize in Harlem, began to have rallies. And I remember the first rally that we had, someone came in Russian saying that Malcolm had sent a note to us saying, you cannot organize in Harlem without me because I am Harlem. And we all went, whoa, you see this? Whoa, he's a racist. Yeah, I know he's a racist. I mean, what are we going to do? Well, you had to let him come in and talk. That's what you did. If you saw Eyes on the Prize, you know what I'm talking about. Only 3 people came from the Corps office, 125th Street, to hear Malcolm, but the whole community came out to hear Malcolm. And on 7th Avenue, there's an island, and I remember, because I'm so tall, as you can see, someone helped me up on the island so I could see him. And, you know, I remember this man getting up on stage and the FOI surrounding him, and the people, everything that he said, the people cheered. Even if he burped, they cheered, right, you know? Even when he hesitated, they cheered. And I remember the 2 people who came with me and said, I'm going back to the office. You know, he's not saying anything of importance. And I remember standing there listening, and when he got ready, when he was finished, it was coming off the platform, I jumped down off the island, and I was able to move through the crowd, and I went, and his back was, and I tapped him on the shoulder. And after I did that, the FOI literally came at me, and he was turning around at the time, and he did like this. And then he finally looked, and one of the brothers said, and he looked down, and then he looked at them like, you know, come on, there's a little woman here, right? You know, what's she gonna do, right? And I said, Mr. Malcolm X, I don't believe everything that you said. And he said, but one day you will, my sister. And he looked at me with such quiet eyes, you know, such loving eyes, and he turned around and they went off along the way. And I remember going back to Corps, saying to people in Corps, you know, Malcolm said, and they went, oh, Sonia, you know he's a racist. Yeah, that's right, he's a racist, and he's not like us, right? And at a party, because we worked hard in New York, but we partied equally as hard on weekends, right? And I was doing the mambo with this guy, and I was doing the mambo, and I said, you know, Malcolm said, and he threw me out. When I came back, he was gone. And the point was simply that at that point, I woke up to the rise and wind of history alone. Some of us got to be alone, who were in organizations. So you gotta chronicle how we went from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. It wasn't because we were like, you know, a non-constant people, because of what was happening in the world. And your politics began to change. But also we began, because we had been doing things already in Harlem, you know, doing those rent strikes, you know, going in where people live. They had stuffed up toilets for a year. We did all of that, you know. We showed them how to put the money in the bank, the rent in the bank that they want to pay, but they're not going to pay until the landlord comes in and fixes everything. And how do you do that with young people? Well, I did it in academia, but then I made my students go outside academia. When we first started Black Studies at San Francisco State, one of the things we did is that we said, your classes cannot just be at San Francisco State. They've got to be outside the university. And so therefore, when I taught creative writing, I took my students out for a semester to help Joe Gonzalez put out a magazine called Journal of Black Poetry. So they had to learn how to edit. They had to learn how to, it wasn't Xerox, they had a, Mimeo, right, you know, our hands were forever blue. At that time, you know, they had to, and then after they put out the magazine, the journal, they had to go out and sell it. They had to learn how to sell a product that they had taken part in. You got to hear that. Whatever. It meant that they were in the communities. They got to know the people. They knocked on doors, right? And they said, you know, the guy said to me, I don't want no damn journal about no poetry, you know. They had to take that and then go to the next person and learn how to really get them to buy it. Come on. They learned about people. They had to learn conversation. How do you converse with people who say, no, I don't want no goddamn thing about poetry, right? Well, how Askia and I did it in a place called Harlem. You know, we went into the bars one day and said to the bartender, can we come in and read some poetry in here to you? He said, yeah, but, you know, they'll probably laugh at you, you know, whatever. So we came walking in, Askia, Teray, and myself. We pulled the plug from the jukebox, you know. And someone asked me, why do y'all curse in your poetry? How we got them is that we use curse words. No, it's very real. And everybody put down the drink and said, what they doing? What they saying? And the moment we got them, we didn't curse anymore. And we got them with the information, but we had to get them as you reach people at the level that what they are. So I'm walking down Lenox Avenue, and some guy said, you're going to see my father. Yo! Ain't you the sister who read that poetry here? I went home and told my old lady, and she was mad as hell at me because I didn't call her. You coming back? I said, yeah, we coming back. The point is that we got to keep coming back even, like we told the students at San Francisco State. You got to keep going back to those people with those journals, because we got to stand there one day and say, here, listen to this poem. And you read the meanest poem you got, something from someone by the name at the time, Leroy Jones, you know what I mean, yeah. Right? You know, and they'll buy that magazine. You have got to, in a very real sense, move people. You got to take your students into the community. We're at Temple, all these schools around us, you know, they're talking about how the schools are failing. How can they be failing? There's a university around them. Right. Answer me. We are professors, right? How can the school be failing, whatever? And so you take your students in to teach, and then you finally say to them, take 1 year off from school and teach in these schools. Just imagine, right? It's just like the chairman when they sent people down to the farms, you know, to learn. But I'm sending you down not to the farms, but to the urban centers to teach. And I said, you're going to go in there, and it's going to be tough. I mean, really tough. I mean, one of the things I do usually when I come in to do a gig, I always ask someone, send me to the high school, you know, whatever, it won't cost you anything. And what do? You go into the high school and you talk to your students. And I remember once going to a high school teaching, and a young brother was brought in by evidently a principal, and he was really angry. So all he kept saying underneath his breath was, fuck. I heard it, I ignored it. You know, I'm on stage, you know, but the students heard, they start laughing. I'm losing my audience. You hear that? And finally when they started to laugh, he said, lot of fuck. So what do? What do you do? So I said, oh, did someone just say, fuck? Well, the whole audience and the teachers were like, oh, whatever, right? But the students are very wise. They said, something's happening here. Because this professor just said the word, you know, that he's been saying under his breath, right? And we've been laughing at, right? I said, did you say, fuck? Or do you say, fuck, 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 fuck. The word had no more meaning. You got to hear that. No one taught me that to prepare me as a teacher, but what did teach me is that if you talk about being spiritual, if you really are in tune to what is going on in the world, something will guide you. Some force will guide you to do that which, even a word that is a curse word, will guide you to make that word not a curse word, whatever. And then I didn't want to embarrass the young brother, so I came off the stage, went down and said, oh, I grabbed him and hugged him and said, thank you for making me be a teacher as usual, right? And I brought him back up on stage, come on, with me. And I said, he's going to stay with me while I say some other things. I said, my dear brother, thank you for, and he just smiled. And he was so happy, you know. So what I'm saying simply at some point is that we're going to battle when we go into these schools. It's a battle, people. It's a battle. Because these kids, first thing they said to me in the conversations that these teachers don't like us. So I said, so what did I say? I said, you're right. And then they said, oh, it's the first time anyone's ever said that. Usually one of the leaders said, people say, oh, yes, they do, they love you. And then at that point, they lean back and don't listen to anything at all. I said, I went to schools in New York City. I said, what did it mean? A teacher in junior high came in and said, I don't know why I'm going to teach, saying to the brothers, because you're just going to end up in jail. And some of them did end up in jail. Looked at the girls and said, I don't know if I'm going to teach you because you're just going to have some babies. And some of them did. But what does that mean? This woman could not see herself in us. You know, she could not imagine our experiences at all. So she came in and she set what was going to happen in that classroom for the rest of the semester, right? Which meant that not a whole lot of learning was going to go on in that classroom. And so I say to all of you is that, you know, we have got to really at some point in our lives, what is going on in America is a very dangerous thing. And in the world, you know, what is going on in America is that we cannot sit back and say we elected in close a black president, you know, and then now we can lean back and do nothing. We can lean back on our eyes and close our eyes, right? Because what is going on in America is not just the Tea Party in Congress, but it's all the other quiet Tea Party people sitting next to you, you know, in the classrooms. It's a dangerous
dangerous, dangerous times we're talking about. And so if, you cannot sit back in your middle class blackness and say simply that I live up in Chestnut Hill or I lived out in the boondocks someplace and none of this affects me. Yes, it does, sucker. It affects you so thoroughly. And you cannot be a hip-hop artist, because I'm very critical of those, who go and call sisters, hoes and stuff. That last big one that hip-hop thing they had at Radio City Music Hall. It's the only one they ever had. And everybody and their mama showed, right? And if you go to a hip-hop thing, you stand for 3 hours. Yeah. You do not sit down. So your legs and knees have got to be in good condition, right? And we're standing up and I'm doing what everybody else is doing, right? Because I do love Talib and I do love Def and Common. I mean, I really do. And, and Erica, when she came on stage, whatever, and we're there, and a brother got up and all of a sudden, in the midst of this, he said, and the bitch and the hoe. So I went, boo! So these young people behind me said, who's she? So who's she? I turned around and said, hey, I'm Sonia Sanchez. And she said, well, why do you boo? I said, oh, you a bitch or a hoe? And then I said, yo mama. Because you can't be selective about the hoes and bitches. You cannot be that. You cannot be that. So they had an after party, and the comedian, what's the brother who went off the air? Dave Chappelle. Dave. Yeah. Dave was standing on the steps, and I was coming up. He said, that was you, wasn't it? I said, yeah. I said, I would boo you too, if you get wrong. But I went in, and they identified, they pointed out the brother, And so I kind of circled, did some circulation there. And I went over to the brother. I didn't say anything to him other than I hugged him. I said, my dear brother, you don't know, but for years we got on stages, and as a black woman, people booed us because they thought black women didn't have anything to say. I said, and we have a lot to say. I said, you need to understand at some point that these women, even though your partners might say, yeah, some of them is hoes, though, you know what I mean? Well, yeah, I said, we got one big whore sometimes, and sometimes the name of those whores happen to be the name of a country, But the people who are living in it, right, have learned, don't know what to do, with what they feel. You know what I mean? Don't know how to express it, don't know how to organize. So therefore, at some point, they can come up against a system that says, you are going to go to jail, right? You are not going to finish school, right? We're going to privatize the schools and also privatize the jails and the prisons. And there'll be one little entrance from the school to the jail. How do you stop that? You can't stop it by saying, nice things. You got to go in roughly rough. And I have gone in some places I have asked, what are you doing here, Sonia? You could be home. I've gone in some people have challenged me, young people, and I had to get up and say, let me tell you something, you dumb MF. Really? Let me tell you who you are, who you think you are. You want to come up on this stage and challenge me. Let me tell you why you act the way you act, why you say stupid stuff. Huh? Why you don't understand why people die for your behind to be here, even in this school today, huh? Huh? And they always look at me like, she really did curse, didn't she? She looked so nice, She got gray in her hair, whatever. She could be my grandmother. I said, yeah, your grandmother curses too. She just doesn't do it in front of you. But your grandmother used to be a woman sitting on a bar stool someplace, listening to Billy and Dinah. And because she goes to church now, don't mean she don't know what that's about, okay? But how do we continue this discussion about change and about how we are enslaved in a place called America, in Syria, and in the world? How do we keep that going, And we really do it by, you've got to get into many organizations, whatever. If you're on a campus, you cannot say, I'll wait until I leave school to organize, I'm poet laureate there in Philadelphia. The first thing that I wanted to do was to do a peace mural. A peace mural, a simple thing. At least I thought it was simple. But peace is never simple. Even if you're going to put it up on a wall. Someone said to me, "You'll never have peace, Professor Sanchez. Why do you want to do a peace mural?" Isn't that something? You know, and I kept struggling. And so on that peace mural, I called some of my friends. I called Sister Toni Mars and said, "Send me a peace haiku, Tony." I called Alice Walker, "Send me a peace haiku." Sister Mars, "Send me a peace haiku." You know, I was in Chicago with Carmen. I said, "Carmen, I've got to teach you how to write a haiku. I want a peace haiku from you." What does that mean? It took a whole year to get it up there. Right. It's amazing. But then that wasn't all that I wanted. I said, I want peace sites in Philadelphia. It's a city that kills constantly. I want peace sites, right? I even asked the mayor, I want peace sites. You know, no one has any money. So what do? You go, and I went down to city council, and one of the city council women, Blackwell, I said, I'd like to have, around the park in Philadelphia, wouldn't it be wonderful if people come to the city of Philadelphia and they sit on a painted bench, not a faded, crazy-looking green bench, right? With peace haiku from our children in the schools. A peace haiku. They sit on a peace haiku. Isn't that something? And on my block, in my block, I went and knocked on the doors and says, "Can we have some peace benches on our porches so when people come and visit us, and can we designate our block a peace site?" Woohoo, one block. No violence occurs here, people. No violence. And why did that happen? Little children would come into school, and I believe in porches, you know, so I sit on my porch. I walk 3 miles, not for a while now, 3 miles every day. I come with my tea and my yogurt on that porch, and I do my work. And one morning I'm there doing that, and these children passing by, and they stop in front of my house to fight. They curse at each other, and I figured they'll move on. You know, you're tired. But we're always engaged. But after I said that, I said, "Oh, Sonia, stop it." Put my book down, jumped off the porch, went down. I said, "Stop it. Stop fighting. What are you fighting about? She said this, and she called me this." I said, hold it. Come on my porch. I said, "I'm going to open the door. Come in my house. What do you feel when you come in my house?" And they said, "Ooh, it's quiet and peaceful." I said, "It is." I said, "And my porch, come on, look, what do you see here?" They said, "We see 2 tables and some tea and a teapot and blah, blah, and some books." I said, "What does it feel like?" "It's peaceful." I said, "No, that sidewalk out there, that's mine too. I want that to be peaceful, you know, and you've got to make it peaceful." I said, and I stood there and taught them how to breathe. How to breathe. Because if you teach them how to breathe, they get rid of a lot of the stuff that is unpeaceful. And so therefore, I'm saying simply, when I went into the schools to teach haiku, to get peace haiku, we could not start until I taught them how to breathe. And once I taught them how to breathe, the whole activities lowered. They didn't need pills, you know, whatever, but it lowered whatever. Because we ignore the very easy things. You teach them how to breathe, and then you look at them. Could you stand up a minute? You look at them, and then I made them sit together, you know, face each other. And the students, of course, they get wild at that time. Let them get wild. Just to put the chairs together, you know, face each other. And then you say, "Shh, shush, shut up, keep quiet." Okay, order. Then I said, "Take your right hand and put it on your partner's heart." Put your hand on my heart. Well, I had a young brother, and he got ready to put his hand here, and the breast is there. And he didn't know what to do, you know. So everybody saw it in the class. So I said, "Look, it's only a breast." I said, "You know, I fed 2 children with this breast right here." And I said, "Plus it's not," and as an aside, I said, "It's not porno." Well, they fell out laughing about porno, you know. I mean, these young people know porno, like you don't believe, right? Whatever. So you put the right hand, right? And then cover my hand with that. Then I said, "Everyone keep quiet. Now we're going to listen to each other's heartbeat." If you remember nothing else I say here, if you're a teacher and you work with young people, make each one listen to each other's heartbeat, because then they'll look at each other and they'll see a human being, not somebody that they can. I'm very serious about that. I've seen it work. A human being. Thank you, my sister. And then they would sit back and they would begin. So what we're saying is there's no easy answer to wherever you are. You go into your community. If you live in a community, you go and you ask, we're going to put peace benches in here. We're going to make this block a peace site. You know, if you see violence, you say no violence can happen here on this, and try to spread it throughout the city. I did a talk at one of the big churches in Chestnut Hill. Eleanor Roosevelt had done it 60 years prior to me. At the end, I talked about peace and the peace mural. They were redoing the back of the church, and I asked them, would you put peace haiku in the back of your church on the wall? And they said, we have to think about it. You know, no, really. Then they called me 2 weeks later, yes, we will. So they have peace haiku. You come in that church, you see the peace haiku, the peace, a haiku about peace. You got to hear that. You know, and I'm saying at some particular point, what we must begin to do is if you believe in peace, if you believe in social change, if you believe in revolution, you know, if you believe in prisoners, then for 5 years I taught at Gradeford Prison. You go and you teach. You teach. You teach. You know, you go into the women's prison, you teach. You teach. You figure out where you want to go, what you want to do, and you do it well. Don't spread yourself thin. I'm in the peace movement. We got arrested. If you remember a couple years ago, the grannies got arrested. All over the country. We all got arrested at the same time. And most of them got, you know, let off. Philadelphia, hard time. They said, we are now going to bring you to trial. Ain't that something? To trial. You know, we had to go to get a lawyer, go to trial. The good thing, we walked in and there was this woman judge. Now she said something interesting, you know, she said, I have Sonia Sanchez as one of, you know, whatever. And I didn't know whether that was good or bad, to be frank, okay? We got very nervous, we women, right? But what we did is that there's a law that is, on the books, that if you sit in and you touch something, you can get 90 days. You hear me? So they claim we destroyed stuff when we came in. We went down to the places where you go, where the people were coming in to register for the draft, right? And we sat in and to disrupt that, whatever. And they said we had, you know, disrupted everything. They arrested us. Can I just say how they did it? They sent the community man in, policeman in, said, ladies, we're going to have to put your hands behind your back and take you out one at a time. So we said, why do you do that? Because we don't want to go anyplace. We want to stay, right? He went out, 15 minutes later, came back and said, okay, ladies, we're going to put handcuffs in front so it won't be so difficult. We said, why do you want to do that? We're not running away. We want to stay here and talk to all these people here, you know, as they try to register people. And then they said the next person was a black woman, policewoman. She walked in and said, Professor Sanchez, what are you doing here? And I said, I whispered, because I knew people were listening. I said, we're against the war. And so we're here getting arrested. She said, don't you worry. I'll take good care of you. I said, my dear sister, you got to hear this. If you take good care of me, and I was your former professor, you have to take good care of the rest of these sisters here. And they were Latina and white. And she said, you know, Professor Sanchez, it was always a trip being your class because you made us think beyond the thoughts that we felt comfortable with. That's what you got to do finally. Make them go beyond what they think is that quick comfort zone, whatever. As they let us out, a woman from NPR said, Professor Sanchez, what would you do if you go into boot camp? And they had, you know, you had registered. I said, we would have done push-ups for peace. You all have got to do push-ups for peace, push-ups against racism and sexism, push-ups for freedom in this country. You got to look at what's going on. And I'll say it again all over. Whenever we have a Congress that is not working, we need to go down and sit in the Congress. Sit in, like people used to do. Disrupt and said, you know, if you don't do the work, you go home. If you don't want to do what is right for we the people, because we are the people with the power, people, we the people, you need to go home. If you don't want to do the work, you know, if you don't want to do the work and pass these bills, you go home and we'll send somebody else. Oh, we need to go into their offices. You're not leaving the office till you go and vote in this bill. You know what I mean? We need to like do activism again. The elderly, the middle, the young, whatever. And we need to bring our children out to that. Remember? Because we brought our children to act. Some people don't bring their children anymore, and so their children are home, you know, doing this. Yeah. No, fighting battles. You ever watch those battles that they fight? Your children are really fighting, right? You know, and killing people and destroying people, whatever. We need to really take them and let them really understand that if you're in line, you can get a bump in your head when you can't get to ICE that will stay with you forever, whatever. You know, you need to really understand that's real battle, and they'll stop wanting to play make-believe battles because the real battle will be outside for them too. Yeah, that was too long, wasn't it?
Do we have questions? Do we have questions in the audience? Do we have questions? Is the mic on? Is the mic on?
The mic's not on. You left that out. That's a cold man there.
Yes, I'd like to thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for the discussion.
What's your name, brother?
James Page.
Okay.
Among other things, I belong to the African Wisdom Circle. I want to ask you all to discuss Dr. Rhonda's question, how do we do the intergenerational wisdom? And what do you all think about the multimedia as being a means of communicating / educating over a broad range of people? Just some comments on multimedia, Facebook, YouTube, that kind of thing.
There's something that I forgot to mention, and I'll jump into answering your question after, but when you were asking about intergenerational wisdom, and then Sister Sonia was talking about actually getting people face to face. When I was working with Blackout Arts Collective, I mentioned in New York, the strategy of the organization was to have members, mostly people of color, who were educating at Columbia, New School, NYU, Medgar Evers, basically every university in New York. And they taught this class called Lyrics on Lockdown. And one of the snazzy titles was Hip Hop versus the Prison Industrial Complex. And I was somebody who saw that too when I was at Columbia. Just a piece of paper explaining the class. And I thought to myself, okay, why don't I take the class? So I took the class. It was taught by a poet and activist named Breon Bain, and he was one of the founders of Blackout Arts Collective. And so basically, the strategy of this class was to get students who were enrolled at some of these colleges to learn how to create lesson plans, learn critical pedagogy like Paulo Freire, learn theater of the oppressed, and then learn about the prison industrial complex and create these lesson plans. And as part of your assignment was that half of the class, so semester-long class, the second half was that we would go into Rikers and we would teach. And we would have to figure out what Paulo Freire calls critical literacy, how to teach in their language. And it's all our language too, but we just don't understand the language of youth. So we were challenged with the task of figuring out how do we talk about, let's say, UN Human Rights Charter Convention on the Child, which the US has not signed on to. So we decided that we were going to give the youth a grade report. And we put an article down for each sort of line as a grade report. And the students had to evaluate how the prison, how their community, how everybody measured up to it. And we taught the concepts by having a hip hop film festival inside Rikers Island for the youth. So we worked with the Hip Hop Association because I don't know if it's changed. I lived in New York in 2006 to 2008, but Rikers Island, you could take nothing in, nothing. You can't take phones, you can't forget multimedia. You're coming in and you are just media, your voice, that's what you're coming in with. But we were able to, after after getting the DVDs approved, because obviously there's the issue of contraband inside the prison walls, we were able to show those movies and those videos that we worked with the Hip Hop Association, and then the students took that and they created grade reports, and we used that to continue some sort of foundational relationship. But actually what we also did from those workshops is we got poems from the students who were teaching and facilitating, so these college students, and these Rikers Island students. So they created poetry, and in a class session we'd have a collective poem. So everybody going around, and that was the other thing, we were very egalitarian about it. If we told you you were going to do this assignment, we were going to participate with you. If we told you that we were going to do a trial by jury, and let's say Jay-Z's on trial, then I'm going to play somebody. I'm going to play the defendant. I'm in your world. And that's the other thing we learned. And the dynamics of it are sometimes so subtle. You have to walk in and you sit in a circle with everybody. You know, you don't stand up, and this is what I'm challenged with within the college classroom setting. So you sit in a circle. When you give them an assignment, you do the assignment with them. And the other thing that we ended up doing was that to further the political education of the people in this class, you mentioned the last poets. The last poets, Abiodun, lives very close to Columbia, and he's a big advocate in teaching the youth and opening his doors to the youth. And every Sunday he opens up literally his door to the community. If they want to come in, he makes salmon croquets, grits. They're excellent. And you come in and you share your poetry and you share your art. And you see so many generations there. And that's how I came to his house, was through this class. And I see him as an elder. And there was I know we fetishize New York, but I guess I missed the way that we had so many overlapping generations, and the way that Blackout Arts Collective was able to make the teachers at the universities, the students, incarcerated youth at Rikers Island, Prison Moratorium Project, Critical Resistance, and the poets all work together. And that's how we made a united front. Now, this question of multimedia, social media and multimedia, it is their language. And so there are various unique ways that you can employ it. One thing that I tried doing once in class was creating a hashtag for class and a Twitter account for class. So I would encourage them, because I knew they were on their laptops when they were lecturing, so I would encourage them to follow up with everything that was talked about. The other thing was I use Skype, and they love it. So we've been talking about the prison industrial complex, Angela Davis, we read Assata Shakur's autobiography, and I thought somebody who loves who loves Angela Davis and is also an artist in his own right is a friend of mine, John Forte. I had John Forte Skype in, and they loved it because it also showed that I cared enough to want to bring in somebody into their world, and somebody that could also humanize what Angela Davis's message was for them. For them, it was just text, you know? But when they heard John Forte talk about that he had a copy of her book that he wouldn't give to his fellow inmates unless they promised that they would return it back in the same condition, they saw the value of what those words meant to him and to other people. So, you know, those are some of the various strategies that I've used inside the classroom. And of course, just transnationally, it's a brilliant tool. That's something that we can, well, it's a brilliant tool, and it's something we have to be aware of as a surveillance tool as well. So a quick story about this. The book that I wrote, I met this Bahraini activist. Her name is Mariam El-Khawaja, brilliant human rights activist. Her father is incarcerated in Bahrain. So is her sister for nonviolent peaceful protest. She'll go out in their city center in the capital called Pearl Square, and she'll just sit out there with a sign or her hand up, and she's protesting, and they'll beat her down, and they'll take her in and imprison her. This has happened multiple times. So her sister's out around the world advocating. We took a picture together. She's in the book. She's my friend. We had arranged when I was in Lebanon with Mariam that I would try to go into Bahrain and go incognito and figure out a way to come back and then tell a journalistic story about what I saw. So I get to Bahrain airport. And I get there around nighttime, and they told me to stand to the side. And I say, okay, okay, what's going on? Is something going on? They're like, no, 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 I'll just take your passport, an American passport, and we're just gonna look at it for a second. 3 hours later, there's nobody left in the airport, in the customs area. It's 1 a.m., and the head of the security of the airport comes out, and he says, so you're not going into my country. And I say, why am I not going into your country? He said, oh, for no reason. What do you mean no reason? And he kept on answering no reason, no reason. I'm the head of security. I get to determine who goes in and out of my country. And then at one point, when I kept on pushing, he slipped and he said, oh, you know why. And I couldn't figure out. I was like, what is he talking about? So he escorts me to the next flight, and he writes me a ticket. I was like, why am I so dangerous to this country? Turns out that they had Googled me at the airport, and they found out that I was a journalist with Al Jazeera, Huffington Post, and that I had taken a picture with Miriam, and I put it on Instagram. Now, my Instagram was open, and all these advocates for the regime in Bahrain started following me on Instagram and Twitter, trying to prove that I am in cahoots with this, who they called her a terrorist, Miriam al-Khawaja. So we have to be savvy about what we post out there and what we hold within our communities, and that's the valuable and sacred space of still being within community and being face-to-face and being able to touch somebody. I say connect with people transnationally and through social media as long as you know who that person is, as long as you have some sort of code between you guys, and as long as you know what is at risk.
And it is monitored. I mean, that's really the key. I remember when we first got our computers at Temple many years ago, and I asked the question. I said, when I erase the stuff, is it erased? And they said, yes. And I said, And it's not erased. No. You know, and so the things that people were saying on there were kept. You know, for years and years. And I think we have to be very savvy the way we were about other things before, about the so-called media. And also young people don't always understand that once you put something on there, it's on there forever. It can affect whether you get a job, you know, where you might end up, if you can get into a country or not, whatever. It is there. And so you have to be very savvy as to how you use it. And why you use it. And it is a great organizing tool, granted. But you need to also know that you don't rely on it always for everything. You can't do it at all, you know, period. Yeah, anyway.
Thank you. I wanted to actually sort of give an advertisement for an issue that of concern for me. Cuyahoga County is going to be spending $120 million proposing to do that for our football stadium improvements. And it would be great to think about actually working on a project that would include all sorts of street theater and opportunities to say absolutely not, this is a waste of resources in our county. And it would be great to have intergenerational work on that, because 20 years ago a bunch of us did that, the children of Dorothy Day, and you know, it was us alone. And it would be great to have a wide ranging of people, you know, all groups, all races, saying $120 million can be used in a different way than for wealthy owners, you know, for entertainment. So I just thought I'd give a suggestion for something we could work on. I'll be here. I'll be in the back.
So we're gonna go to this question over here. We're at 8:15. We can take maybe one or two more questions. We're gonna have a book signing outside across the hall and a light reception. So I wanted to make sure people had a chance to kind of mingle, have conversation, and both of our keynote speakers will be there. So let's get a question, and we'll talk. So we have two questions over here, and so we'll finish up after that.
I'll be brief. I'm Deborah, and I'm honored to be in the presence of all three of you. You mentioned Dorothy Day, and I was privileged to be introduced to her 3 years ago here on campus, her writings. I kind of relate her to Mother Teresa. She had this love movement going strong. I wish you could speak a little bit more about that. And my second question is the biodynamic healthy foods that you briefly spoke about. Do you believe that we are what we eat? And can the three of you speak to that? Thank you.
Maybe one of you can take one of the questions.
The food.
The food of every day.
I didn't mention.
I think he mentioned every day, but we can probably speak on a couple of things. One of the things that I am always so concerned about is, what our children, what they eat, and what we eat also too. And you ask, are we what we eat? Probably so. On some levels, right? It shows up in terms of our bodies, what it is that we eat. I'm not a fanatic about this thing called food. I don't think you're going to change a lot of people, at least people of color, from how they eat. But you can have a conversation about how they cook it, and what goes into it. A prime example would be my dad, who would come down. I mean, for years, he'd come down and we would not have turkey. I would do a fancy thing of baking fish. And one year he called down and said, I'm going to go to some friends because they're having turkey, and I'm sick of fish, on Thanksgiving. And I said, oh, Dad, don't worry, I can cook a turkey. I hadn't cooked turkey in so many years, I didn't have a clue anymore as to what the temp or whatever. But I did get an organic turkey, and I did get one that maybe weighed about 15 to 16 pounds because, at Thanksgiving time, students could not go home. And so you had all these students from the continent in your house and, from Latin America and from Cleveland, because they were going to go home two weeks later after exams. So you had all these people. And I finally called someone and I said, how many hours do you cook a 16-pound turkey? And they said, I don't know, my grandmother does it, my mother does it, whatever. So I was really frantic. And then I remember I'd been on Amtrak coming from my father's house, and they had this thing about turkey emergency in one of their magazines. And it was a number, so I dialed this number. It was a recording that said, if you're cooking a 10-pound turkey, you should cook it so long, and if it's stuffed so long. So I did that. In the midst, that's what I did, and I did, the mac cheese that my dad loved, but I also did greens, but I put miso soup in the greens instead of the salt pork, because miso soup is salty, like salt pork, and it gives the same kind of taste, right? But anyway, my dad would sit down at the head of the table with all my students sitting around. We had about 3 tables in the dining room, the foyer, whatever, etc. And he says, well, I'm going to cut this turkey now, but my daughter hasn't cooked a turkey in years, and it's probably bloody, and it doesn't taste good. And I have students looking at me, looking at them. They don't know whether they should laugh or not, because they're still in my class, and they haven't gotten their grades as yet, right? And anyway, because it was organic, it was a fantastically tender, great turkey, period. And I guess what I'm saying is that, granted, I didn't eat the turkey, I still had fish, but the point is that you can't go to extremes. I learned a great deal about extremes, my dear sister. When we went into something, we were extremely extreme, right? And then people dropped away from you because, you ate too extremely, whatever. Or when I went south, people would give me food, and I didn't want to eat it because I knew it was unhealthy. And initially, I would say, no, thank you, but you offend Southern people if you don't eat their food. So I had to learn how to eat before I went to their places. And then I would take a plate and eat a little bit and put it down, and they didn't care whether I finished it or not. But I had to learn how to be really careful about how you offend people, because you can offend people by refusing their food. Yeah. You got to hear that. And so therefore, I learned how to adjust what I thought about my eating habits and how I ate and how I eat. But I also learned, too, that when people were ill and sick with cancer and other things, that I would get a cook that would do microbiotic cooking for them and would help them survive for years and years because of it also too. And that turned a whole lot of people to eating well, by the way, because they saw real changes happening. And so yes, you've got to be very careful about what you eat. You have to also be very careful about who gives you food. Because, you know, I know that someone had tried to poison me once because I threw up immediately. And it put me on guard at some point, which I was not aware of. I mean, I went home really sick. And so therefore, this thing with food and what they have in the newspapers now, this thing with food is a very critical thing, that people know how you eat and they come and prepare you special food, you know? Whoa. And it can be very dangerous. So therefore, sometimes you end up eating what other people eat too, to survive. This thing, there are all kinds of people who have done some amazing work in education, and they're saintly. You know, they're like saints in a sense, you know. There's some people that I've known in the movement that at some point they changed my idea about how you should look at people. And, you know, there were people that I met who were in the South. There were whites in the South and there were whites in the North who literally came into a movement, and they came with such joy and such beauty and such love and respect, whatever, that you had to change how you thought about this, you know. Because, you know, we said out loud, you know, whites, like, whoa, whatever. But we never really meant it, because we had whites in our movement, but we were talking about the larger group of whites, you know, whatever, who really didn't care about us as a people. But there were people in a movement that were really, and I'm blanking on names now, you know, the sister in Detroit with her husband, you know.
Oh, Grace Lee Boggs.
Grace, yeah, Boggs. I mean, when you were with Grace and Dorothy Day, you really knew people who were holy. You know, you knew people who looked at the world in such a way that they knew, one, change would come, but it would come in a very actively quiet way, right? You know, and they would not offend people in doing it. So we learned a great deal from these women and these people. We learned how not to offend with the mouth, whatever. We learned how to listen very carefully. And we learned how not to, in a sense, look at people in terms of color, whatever, but to know also too that people, you know, you have to look into their hearts and their souls and see how they were willing to put their lives on the line for a lot of people on this earth, okay?
Can I just, sorry, I know we're short on time. Can I jump on the food issue? I'm deeply passionate about food, and I think two countries really showed that to me, Haiti and Syria. I come from a family of farmers, so besides just the South, I mean, if you go to Syria and you refuse food, they think it's part of the game and the play. Oh, then we have to force it on you. No, thank you. They're just being gracious. You have to accept food. But the interesting thing is that when I compared the experiences I had with food and the people who reared and harvested and grew the food that they were serving us between here in the US, it's so interesting that we're supposedly the wealthiest, one of the wealthiest nations on earth, and we have the poorest quality food on this earth. And think about how crazy it is that Haiti, I went to Haiti February 2012. There was a community called MPP, and they're an organized group of farmers, collective co-op farmers throughout Haiti, about 40,000 people who are organized. And they do all sorts of things to continue to harvest their food when they don't have resources. So instead of pots, they'll use old tires. And the food they served us was incredible. And the interesting story about this organization is after the earthquake, what happened was that Monsanto, everybody's familiar with Monsanto, a big agribusiness company that, yes, horribly atrocious practices, and is one of the reasons why all our food is GMO'd and why we're actually eating chemical weapon products instead of food. They tried to donate seeds to Haiti. When the seeds came over, MPP burned the seeds. Why are we not burning anything? Why are we paying for that? Why are we going to the grocery store like Sister Sonia and then just not throwing it into a cart and saying, we deserve better? That's what I mean about dignity. We deserve better than that, than paying for that, than paying for them to poison us with something they won't even allow scientists to test. They will not even allow scientists to test it. Somebody was their tenure was almost taken away for testing a Monsanto seed. So this has to tell you how important it is that what they want to cover up. This is why we have the food pyramid in elementary school. This is why we have to eat grains and dairy, because that's what is being subsidized by our country. Grains, dairy, corn, soy, and peanuts. Anytime I see those 5 foods and ingredients, I say, I have to check more about this product, because this product's trying to poison me. And so this is the way that I've learned to approach food. And I'll just say one more thing. In Syria, I would go back home and I would eat like it was my job. I wouldn't work out. And here in the US, I would try so hard to, get my yoga in, to eat minimally, to meticulously make sure that I was eating properly. When I went back home to Syria, eat all day, every day, could not breathe. I was eating so much. I lost weight. Why did I lose weight? It's real food. My body was like, I can digest this.
I think you kind of answered my question. I was going to speak on Monsanto and the GMO food and all the weird science that's going on with him playing God with our nutrition, which is causing a lot of the problems. And the reason why a lot of people are not able to do any better is because they don't have the brain power to do it anymore, because their brain is not being rejuvenated by the natural nutrients. He's playing God with our seeds. He's taking them and hiding them underground somewhere to save them for the higher echelon or whoever. He's trying to get rid of so many people. And that's what his plan is. And he's admitted it. It's on YouTube. You can listen to him say what his plans are. And that only includes the extremely wealthy. That does not include the almost wealthy or got a little bit of money in the bank or, so don't think that you're going to be safe with. Bill Gates is the head of Monsanto. The FDA is right in bed with him and everybody else that's cooperating with him. We are not getting real food, just like she said. And I want everybody that's here, we had 2 marches here in Cleveland. I didn't see any of these faces there. 2 marches against Monsanto. And among those people were barely, not even, I can't even count them on one hand, people that look like us. So we need to, black people, we need to get involved in our food and what our children are eating. No aspartame. Do not give that aspartame to the elders and to the young children. Okay, Sonia, I'm really glad to see you. I've been with you for a long time. You just don't know me. I fly under the radar. My name is Oladeji. I'm on your Facebook fan page, and I'm on Facebook under Vicky Aqua or Aqua Vicky. They call me Mama O. I'm a poet from the 60s also. My mentor is Paul Laurence Dunbar, and I didn't hear his name on that list.
I didn't finish the list. Yeah.
I didn't say, keep that in mind. We have to really watch what we eat. It's important. They're trying to turn America into a third world country. They're taking the money out. I don't know what they're doing with it. The bankers are taking the money out, leaving the people with no homes, no mortgages being paid. All the businesses are moving to China or wherever, but we have to beware. We're going to be on our own, so learn how to plant and grow.
And also, my sister, when you destroy a middle class, that means you also destroy a movement, any movement that can come up at some point. When you destroy the educational system, what they're doing, it means that, they have looked at how we happen. Our group, our generation has been studied thoroughly now. How did they come up? How did this bunch of quiet people who were getting a degree someplace, how did all of a sudden pop up and become SNCC people, CORE people, Black Power people, Black Panther people? Where did they come from? And you understand that if you look at them, every last one of them, were educated. We were gotten educated in America, right? We had the time to do that. And it says we will not only educate the people we want educated, not this vast group of people. I was told by a very important black man. I was getting an honorary degree. And he said at the black school in Ohio, Wilberforce, he said, "Who are you?" And I told him where I came from. He said, "You would never have ever gotten even a degree like you have now without being on the list." He said, "You would not have gotten an honorary degree without our approval." And what are they saying? You see, they're saying simply at some point that when we got into academia and we opened it up to everyone, then they didn't know who got a degree. You know, they didn't know, I mean, the people that we got sent out into the world with degrees, whatever, MAs and PhDs, they couldn't control at some point. And before, it was a controlled society, and it's returning to that now, but with a vengeance, with people who are billionaires, whatever, you know, with people who are controlling what we eat. So that's why you've got to be very careful what you eat. It's better not to eat when you go someplace if you're unsure, okay? It's a dangerous thing that we're under. That's what I meant up there, that it's dangerous not because of ideas, but because, you know, you are not needed anymore. Yeah. They don't need us anymore. And when you're not needed, then it means that you can destroy via food. You know, you can destroy by not educating our children, our grandchildren, whatever. You can destroy people, and you can change New York City that only the wealthy can live. And the poor will go outside New York City, and they'll come in like they did in South Africa. Right. And then go back out to Long Island at night, you know. This is the real deal. And it is difficult to explain that to people because we have people who own the media. And so the TV is stuff, I mean, you really have got to, let me tell you something. There's something called the art of substitution. You know, when I see stuff that I know is incorrect for my brain, I immediately reject it. You know, and then I substitute something that is important. You got to hear that, you see. And we have got to teach our children how to do that. We can't take it all in. Here, and here, and then think that they're not affected by it. I'm serious when I talk. I didn't do the whole naming of all the shows. I mean, I watch young people watch things like Revenge and women screwing all over the television and say, that's hip. That's advancement. You see, screwing ain't advancement. Screwing is just something you do. You know what I mean? You know, it's normal, you know, but it ain't advancement, you see, whatever. And you see, you need to go see 12 Years a Slave, and you really understand what it means, whatever, you see. So I'm just saying at some point that this thing that they're doing to us and to our children is that they're limiting us. And I wasn't kicking the media as such, right? You know, but I'm saying that we should control at some point what is said by us I'm serious about this, because you are, the moment you click on, you're on. And they monitor every bloody thing that you say, you know, period, whatever. And that's a dangerous thing. So therefore, I will let people do things for me. I have Facebook, whatever, but I never put on there what I really think. Why? It's like, I don't know, you're too young to remember this, but they used to come and ask for the census in Harlem. They go to all the buildings, they would say to people, how many people live in this apartment? And everybody in that building would say 1. Well, you know why? It's about protection. So they come to my building, my house. I live in a house, people, with gardens, whatever. The last census. How many people live here? I say 1, whatever. Because you have got to remember, I don't care how wealthy you think you are, you know, how hip you think you are, how advanced you think you are, you know, period. You're in America, you know, and people don't need to know how many of us exist, period. If you're white, you don't need to know how many you exist also too, right? Anyway.
We're gonna end on that note. we're gonna end on that note. Sister Sonia and Maytha will be at the book signing table. We have a reception across the hall. It's 8:35. Unfortunately, they may kick us out of the building a little after 9, but we're gonna hang here as long as we can. We can sit in the building, finish the food at least. But please give them a round of applause.